Attack on Titan was the very first anime I watched, and it immediately hooked me in a way so few stories ever do. I just sat there watching episode after episode after episode, completely entranced. In a way, it was more than just a show to me, as weird as that sounds. It was a gateway into another medium entirely, and maybe that's part of why my passion for the story never wavered. Well, until the end. Now, I know this topic has been discussed a lot. No matter what I say, I'm probably beating a dead horse. Some liked it, some didn't. If you did, heck yeah, that's awesome. I wish I did. If anything, the anime ending seems like it got a really positive reception. And yet, I'm here. Because 3 years after reading the final chapter and 4 months after the final episode's release, I still can't stop thinking about it. So yes, this video is about how I think Attack on Titan lost its way. But it's about more than that too. It's about why I loved this story in the first place, about the characters I cared for, and about the themes and ideas that connected with me. It's about everything I have to say about the end of Attack on Titan. But first, it's time for this video's sponsor, Storiaverse. Storiaverse is a new app focused on delivering mature, original, adult-oriented stories and animation. They have this pretty unique read-watch format I've never really seen elsewhere. It's basically a selection of prose paired with short animations that, combined together, tell a complete story in about 10 minutes apiece. I watched a bunch of their stories, and they were all super varied with different styles of animation, but my favorite was probably God's Dog, which follows a man up north trying to escape from a murderous polar bear. It was just an interesting little story about the horrors and beauty of nature with well-directed animated sequences. Overall though, the biggest thing I appreciate about Storiaverse is its potential as a platform for animators. This could be a new home for animations created by individuals or small teams. Honestly, regardless of what I think of any of the individual stories, that's what matters most. I want somewhere where these types of projects can thrive, and I hope Storiaverse can be that place. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, feel free to check out Storiaverse. The app is available entirely for free on the App Store and Google Play. Also, give them a follow at Storiaverse for upcoming trailers and behind-the-scenes content. As always, thanks for watching, and thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. Anyway, back to Attack on Titan. From the very beginning of Attack on Titan, I loved Eren Yeager. The brutal simplicity of this revenge-driven boy spurned forward by his mother's gruesome death instantly hooked me. It's such a basic idea, a tragic plot beat not unlike those that kick off so many works of fiction, imploring us to understand the protagonist's emotions and drive going forward. And yet, particularly with the anime, it solidified this as one of my favorite opening episodes of any show. The way it builds to the Colossal Titan's first appearance, these shots of a beautiful sky stretching out over the wall, clouds moving quickly as the wind picks up, the world seeming too slow as people go about their everyday lives. Then the wind stops. The world goes completely still as one final moment of normalcy stretches before their world is forever changed. The Titan shadow falling over our minuscule characters, selling just how big of a threat this is in comparison to them. How it's more like a force of nature than a simple monster. The music swelling in with them, like the chiming bells and chanting choir are something they brought with them from the outside as well. Though we didn't get that much time with Eren's mother before this, that hardly matters, because the way she screams and yells at Eren, begging him to just listen to her this one time, the way she has to cover her mouth to stop herself from screaming at them to come back for her, in just a couple scenes, it makes me buy into their relationship, understand their dynamic, and believe that they are a family. As with any big moment in a story, it all comes down to the presentation. Not the simple beats of the plot, not a synopsis of events, but the things they make us feel as every element of this piece of art comes together to create something truly powerful and memorable. But of course, there's a lot more to Eren than this moment alone. Even before tragedy strikes, the first thing we learn about him is that he's a contrarian. While the society at large is fine staying within the walls, he views this piece as a temporary, hollow existence, like they're animals in a cage. No, in order to really live, to really be free, you would need to see beyond those walls. And this focus on freedom defines his character every bit as much as his mother's death. And yet, despite his convictions, Eren's freedom has been in question from the very start. Being carried away from his mother by Hans, Keith busting his equipment to try and stop him from becoming a soldier, Levi and the Survey Corps keeping him on a tight leash when they learn he's a Titan shifter. At many points, Eren starts to even function more as a plot device than a protagonist, getting kidnapped and moved around from scene to scene, his moments of action few and far between. There's so much standing between him and his goals, and a lot of that is simply out of his control. In the end, it all leads to a natural question. How much freedom has Eren ever truly had? Altogether, what makes Eren so interesting to me is how brutally the story challenges his ideals. Because on its face, Eren got what he needed here, the power necessary to defeat the Titans and win his freedom. And yet with that same power, he gets more restrictions. So for Eren, every win has a greater loss buried beneath its surface. Like how right away, Eren turning into a Titan brings Eren's whole worldview into question. The Titans are bad. They're the monster. So what does it mean if Eren, for some reason he can't possibly know, has become one of those monsters? This way, his transformation manages to implicitly challenge him on the most fundamental level, turning the premise of the story and Eren's convictions on their heads. And naturally, this is only used to push back against him more. After all, with this power comes responsibility. He's humanity's ultimate weapon, so this can no longer be his personal quest alone. He has a duty to his companions, to his people, something larger than himself to live for. And yet, where others may see purpose, aren't these also just more restrictions? Perhaps the worst thing this power does to Eren is make him lonely. After all, some of him must have already felt that way before when the world was seemingly at peace, but now he's joined the Survey Corps. He's surrounded by comrades with similar goals. And yet, due to his powers, he's left isolated, worrying that he won't be able to build relationships built on trust or have anyone he can rely on. And how couldn't he feel that way as the number of lives lost protecting him continues to climb higher and higher? And when his comrades suffer deaths every bit as brutal as his mother's. Squan Levi's death changes Eren, but it's not just the fact they died, it's the way they died. That Eren chose to trust the plan and run away. That he chose to believe in his growth, to think that he could be something other than that child hopelessly rushing toward a Titan. And yet, it didn't turn out. Even with all his training and power, it was so much like that day, and it made him feel like a weak child once more. So now he needs to be worth that loss. Failure isn't an option. Trying his best simply isn't good enough. And other characters tell him this, let him know what they expect of him, what he needs to do. And if he can't do that, if he won't, well, then they'll keep pushing him. And even if they don't, the world certainly will. And isn't it only natural for someone to crack under all that pressure? Following failure after failure, Eren finally has a moment where he stops fighting. And seeing him at this pathetic low, knowing he's capable of such a pathetic low, it only made him more compelling to me. Because this is the ultimate change for Eren, isn't it? For him to go from someone special, someone chosen, to a mistake that never needed to have happened. I love everything about this scene. The way it builds to Eren's breakdown as he learns the atrocity his father committed, killing children and even someone Historia deeply loved. The parallels of his own father injecting him with the Titan serum, and now the same thing about to happen to Historia too. And the terror as he sees so much of his father in Rod. How even if it's a lie or at least a deeply twisted version of the truth, Eren is forced to face the idea that so long as he has this power, the Titans will remain, making his very existence something that stands between him and his goal of destroying them. And Eren's silence throughout this scene, the look in his eyes as in horror he watches his world and everything he believed in crumble apart. It makes this twist hit not because of its wider ramifications for the plot, but because of his character, because I care about Eren, and he's learning info that will no doubt lead to a deep change within him. And it's not just Eren who makes this scene so fantastic, it's Historia, and how the story calls back to the past moments that were so key to her life, to the deep-seated reasons she can't just be a pawn in Rod Rice's scheme, and why she decides Eren can't be either. Live your life with pride. And there's no need to spell anything out in dialogue beyond that, is there? Because this image of Ymir with the beautiful sunlit sky behind her, it gets across the tone and deeper meaning so well in a way heavy-handed dialogue never could. And when Eren does manage to get a win following this scene, it doesn't simply feed his freedom complex. Instead, he walks away from this seemingly more mature, understanding that this power isn't truly his own and that he's no more special than anyone else. That great power comes from joining together. He doesn't need to view these restrictions as negative. Instead, he needs to accept that this is how his life is now, and that there's an important purpose in that. But then the basement happens, and everything changes once more. Before this moment, the outside world was a source of hope for Eren. He may have stopped focusing on that shared dream with Armin as much, but it still stood as a bright light at the end of a very dark tunnel. Now though? Well, he learns from his father's words and memories that the world outside the wall is every bit as cruel as the world inside. In fact, it's probably worse. So is there really freedom out there, or just more obstacles and enemies ready to take their lives? Of course, Eren's answer is clear. Those enemies on the other side of here. If we kill them all, does that mean we'll be free? And the way everyone else is so excited, but Eren just looks almost detached and confused. It really sells him as separate from these soldiers and his friends, his memories, his understanding of his father's words. Once more, they've changed him, and he understands his role doesn't simply demand deeper responsibility. No, there's something more sinister there, something born only from seeing this truth about the outside world. Which is why, to me, the best moment surrounding this twist isn't the flashback to Grisha or any of the shocking revelations that come with it. No, the most meaningful moment is far simpler than that. I don't know what the right choice is. How can anyone know the future? We still don't know a thing. Flaming water, frozen plains, snowfields on sand. There's an endless number of possibilities. I think on the other side of the walls, there's freedom. Much like with the story's premise, this terror is equally brutal and effective in its simplicity. A pack of wild dogs killing a young girl, killing his father's little sister because he made one terrible mistake, because he dared to go beyond the walls. Titans, dogs, or any other creature, it doesn't matter. This is a world where cruelty lurks around every corner, where so long as there are people around, suffering will follow. Underlying all the complexity baked into these strange supernatural systems, titans and serums and shifters and paths and all of it, the moments that form our characters' emotional cores are often so simple, so easy to relate with. And that's why I was able to understand how Eren, after learning about this, would become every bit as cold and cruel as the world he was forced to face. Eren's conversation with Reiner here has to be one of the story's best scenes. Finally sitting with this character again, but seeing him so different. Laying out Reiner's perspective with a cold confidence and conviction, telling him how before he was like a child, unable to understand Reiner, but now he gets it. He's engaged with the wider world, has learned how everyone is so similar, how they all have their own perspectives, dreams, and justifications. It feels like, in a way, Eren has grown up, has come to understand that he can see humanity in the enemy, can see himself in the enemy. More than anything else, Titans have gone from monsters to objects of pity, people who had their freedom stripped away from them by a force greater than themselves. That even holds true for the likes of Annie, Berthold, and Reiner, who he hated so much. Eldian child soldiers fighting for Marley, much of their autonomy taken from them. So now, Eren's revenge isn't against the Titans. It's against the people who took freedom away from the Titans, and from him and his friends and others like them. And yet, somehow, that hasn't made Eren any kinder, any less violent. In fact, it's just the opposite. Because if he can see himself in the enemy, that means he understands their fear, and he knows that, just like him, they won't back down. They're too similar, which is exactly why Eren chooses to be like Reiner, killing the enemy regardless of how many might be innocent, all because of his sense of responsibility, all because of his desire for freedom, and all because he simply doesn't see another option. Yet, underlying all of that, there's such a simple question. Why was my mom eaten by a Titan that day? And the story's willingness to take its time on this development, to follow another set of characters entirely for multiple chapters and episodes, barely mentioning or showing Eren throughout. It's bold, but it makes the parallel between Eren and the rest of the world so much more powerful, because now I'm seeing Eren through the eyes of characters I also understand so well. Because now, much like how Eren forced himself to spend time among and understand the enemy, the story has forced me to as well. And that's the only reason I can truly feel how much of a monster Eren has become. This is the type of emotion-driven storytelling that's only possible for me when proper time is allotted to it, and when characters are put at the center of the action. This is why the basement twist worked so well for me. Not the moment of reveal in and of itself, but the sheer commitment to its implications and how it impacts Eren. It truly felt like all the challenges I had watched him go through up until this point had culminated in this. However, there was still the simple fact that all I could do now was try and read into Eren's motives. Because even after this, we no longer got much in the way of internal monologues from him. Ever since the multi-year time skip following Eren at the ocean, he had become a mystery to be solved, his plans up in the air. It was another bold narrative choice, and one that kept me reading with bated breath, waiting for whatever grand reveal had been cooked up this time. And it led to what many consider Attack on Titan's greatest twist of all. And the moment I started to fear, Attack on Titan was losing its way. This is it, everybody. After chapters and chapters of Eren and Zeke trying to touch brotherly bonds, they've finally done it and they're inside paths together. They're going on a tour through Grisha's memories. Zeke still thinks Eren is being influenced by his father's brainwashing, but that was never how it happened. In fact, Zeke couldn't be more wrong. And that's where we get the big, brain-busting reveal. Eren told Grisha to kill this family in the Crystal Catacombs, and Eren told him to take the Founding Titan for himself. And I didn't like this moment. Well, maybe that's too strong. As I read through the chapter and saw the masterful presentation of Grisha's shock and terror, saw Zeke's realization of how wrong he was, and the simple cool factor of Eren's commitment here, I was shocked. And just like with many of Attack on Titan's best plot twists, it had taken my breath away. But then I set the chapter aside and I just thought about it. I thought about the wider implications, about what it really means if Eren can manipulate the past, if he already has manipulated the past. And that's when I got a little concerned. Because here's the thing, I already loved that past scene between Eren and Historia in the catacombs, and a big part of that was because of Eren's terror at what his father had done. I had already grown attached to this version of events, where Grisha did something for his own reasons, but they were entirely separate from Eren, something that he played no part in, but now, this wouldn't have happened without him. So yes, we do get a really cool twist here, but the cost of that twist is that my prior interpretation of this scene, an interpretation I've already grown attached to and that made perfect sense based on all the information provided, now becomes incorrect. And the emotions I felt, well, they feel undermined. Now, I want to be clear here. In this specific instance, this isn't awful by any stretch of the imagination, because that prior scene still retains a ton of its emotion. After all, regardless of what happened later, this Eren at this point in time still needed to face what had happened, still felt these emotions and this pain, and it still built up his relationship with Historia and showed her at her strongest and most compelling. If anything, Eren becoming the person who caused this, after being so horrified about it, well, it's a fantastic way to solidify his status as the story's villain. Plus, okay, the connection with Ymir here, like that we go from the other Ymir telling Historia that she needs to live free, which inspires her to tell Eren that he needs to live free and do what he wants to do and that he can't give up, which then is reflected when Eren tells the original Ymir kind of the same thing to break her free from her chains, just like how Historia broke him free from his chains. And that's just, it's great. It's super cool. I love it. So really, in and of itself, this scene is great, and yet I still had concerns. Because yes, while it worked here, this brought in the possibility that Eren could manipulate the past again. Prior scenes could take on new meanings, the emotions I had previously felt and the interpretations I had grown attached to, they could be undermined. And what if the next time it wasn't so successful? At the time, I brushed these concerns aside though, because while I could sit here questioning things, I had trust in the story. So I decided to roll with the punches, give it good faith, and just believe in the process. Like sure, I could question whether maybe Eren would have gone back to save his other friends or his mom, but there would probably be a good explanation for this. Heck, maybe even the explanation was right in front of my face, and this was a one-time event only made possible by Eren and Zeke touching, Eren sharing Grisha's memories, and the power of paths. If that had been the case, I would purely be singing this scene's praises like anyone else. But of course, that isn't what happened. Instead, the Attack Titan's hidden abilities related to the past and the future would go on to shape the rest of the story's narrative, undermining so much of what I had grown to love about it in the first place. As far as I'm concerned, the final chapter of Attack on Titan is easily the worst of its entire run. An uneven, sloppy mess that attempts to twist, recontextualize, and elevate all past material, but instead, only makes the story worse. However, it's not as though everything leading up to this was perfect. No, there were plenty of nagging issues that slowly chipped away at my enjoyment of the story. But most of these were relatively minor, things where if I had loved the ending, I probably would have been willing to look past them or see them in a different light when I went back. Instead though, the ending brought these flaws to the forefront, and I found myself focusing on them more than ever before. For example, following the rumbling, I was left with the feeling that, at times, things were just too easy for our heroes. Like Armin and Connie just happening to run into Annie, which is the only thing that allows them to join forces against Eren. Or Falco turning into a bird titan and saving the gang just in the nick of time. Or the very fact that this massive horde of titan shifters just generally didn't feel like as much of a threat as I would have expected. And instead of letting these exist as problems I had, the ending spends some time explaining them, implicitly justifying prior issues by revealing them to be hints of a twist. See, my feeling that things were sometimes too easy for the heroes here, well, it was too easy for them, because they didn't really win due to their own strength. Instead, Eren let them win, so that they would look like heroes to the rest of the world. Already, this left me annoyed. Like, I had spent a good deal of time thinking about these chapters and plot lines, and even if some of it felt forced, I still enjoyed many of the victories these characters earned. For example, I really liked Armin's heartfelt speech to Zeke about the meaning of life, and how it inspired past Titan shifters to break free from Eren's control and fight for themselves. Except, maybe they didn't break free. Maybe this wasn't because of Armin. Maybe Eren simply allowed it. And that goes for all the struggles they faced in this battle. The whole thing was a facade, a pretend conflict that was always going to result in a victory for our heroes, regardless of any decisions they made. And that's just such a weak conflict. And yet, Eren didn't totally let them win, because while he allowed them the finishing blow, he still saw most of the rumbling through. He still wiped out 80% of the world's population. When Eren began the rumbling, I wholeheartedly believed he had every intention of flattening the entire Earth. His hatred of any who would stifle his or his friend's freedom, his disappointment in seeing an outside world just as violent as the world within the walls, his comrades' inability to come up with another plan. All of it came together to make Eren's decision believable and, just as importantly, compelling. Because Eren didn't become this on his own, did he? No, he was pushed to this point, as his people's only hope and the ultimate weapon he needed to succeed. And so, when backed into a corner, when made to feel as desperate as possible, he became what Levi and the others hoped he would. Someone who was truly capable of destroying all their enemies, but in a completely different context than they had ever imagined. And with that comes responsibility for them, too. I mean, they didn't know things would turn out this way, but they still put everything on Eren. And so instead of becoming the hero who could fulfill all their dreams, he became the villain who would make their world a nightmare. In my mind, once Eren did this, that had to be it. As much as his friends would want to believe he had other plans, that just didn't make sense anymore. He had done something that could never be taken back. In fact, it seemed the final, most brutal twist of Attack on Titan would be that Eren's friends had to accept that there was no final twist. Eren was a monster, and that was simply that. So when it's revealed that Eren allowed it to stop 80% in, well, I'm confused. How could he possibly rationalize this? If he wanted to lift his friends up as heroes, shouldn't he maybe let them stop him earlier? By all accounts, he's condemned them to a life of fighting against people who will no doubt fear them more because of what he did. After this, when I go back and read everything following Attack on Titan's big time skip, the material is just less interesting to me. Where before I saw a version of Eren who was a villainous culmination of all his prior flaws, the choices he had made, and the terrible world he had seen, now there's something else. A confused, half-hearted character who, despite being placed into the role of villain, is really just waiting nearly 50 chapters before he can reveal his deeper plan, no matter how irrational that plan is. And so, the twist has only weakened this arc, an arc I have spent about a third of the story getting invested in. However, this is far from the only twist at the end of Attack on Titan, and definitely not the only reason Eren does what he does, because he manages to achieve his goal from the very start of the series. He manages to rid the world of the curse of the Titans. So, how exactly did he do that? Well, he forced Mikasa into a situation where she would need to kill him to save the world. And when Ymir saw this, when she saw Mikasa kill the man she loved, it inspired her to break free from her own twisted love of King Fritz, thus erasing the Titan curse. And, I've got a problem with this. A big one. Eren and Mikasa's relationship. The recontextualization of this scene and the way it haunts Mikasa is one of my favorite things about this final stretch of the story. It was always just as horrifying as it was heroic. The fact that this child was emotionally capable of murder. In fact, the further the story goes, the more it becomes clear that this was the core of Eren's character all along. While to Mikasa it showed her how she could fight for herself, gave her the strength to live, it also should have shown her that he was a person capable of shocking violence. Of course, though, she didn't see the potential darkness in this act. And why would she? He had saved her life. Yet, as the conflict grows more complex and his actions unforgivable, her perspective on the scene is brought into question. And it's clear that it tortures her because she loves Eren. She's always wanted to be with him. So does this red scarf around her neck symbolize the way he protected her? Or does it symbolize the blood left in his wake? And as she learns more about the Ackerman clan's past, as Eren claims that they're drawn to protect their host by a biological instinct they can't shake, rather than her own care for him, well, she begins to question everything about her own motives and feelings, to question if she even has free will. For her, that's why killing Eren represents breaking free from the chains of twisted love. And this all sounds good. And it is. I care about and understand Mikasa's side of this. However, there's another equally important side I don't care about the same way. Eren's. Because honestly, I didn't know Eren reciprocated these feelings. Like, obviously I knew he cared about her, but I didn't know he loved her romantically. In fact, I thought this moment where Mikasa went in for a smooch and he vowed to protect her kinda confirmed otherwise. He was saying like, just on that day before, he would always protect her. But that didn't mean this was also romantic, and we didn't follow up on any of that potential. I mean, Mikasa always looked like she was ready to slice a woman open if they dared speak with Eren for too long, which heavily implied she still had these feelings for him. But what about Eren's opinion of her? Save for one moment in chapter 123, they never talked about it again. So from chapter 50 through 123, that led me to believe that Eren had rejected her feelings. If I'm wrong, I would have liked to see more about that and to have been given an opportunity to care more about them as a potential couple. In all honesty, I never even thought they had all that much chemistry together in any way, like as friends or potential partners. That's not to say this was a problem. He worked well enough as a sort of bratty sibling, frustrated with his sister's overprotective nature. But their dynamic rarely went all that far beyond that. It was fairly one note, but it also never got undue focus. Until now. Until it becomes so instrumental to the very end of the series. So honestly, I don't have a problem with Eren getting a pathetic moment like this. I'm fine with a bit of that desperate side of himself coming out here. My issue is that it's brought about by a romance I have little to no investment in. But then there's one more side of this. Ymir's side. And this is fascinating to me. How could this girl love the man who did this to her? Just how? I mean, seriously, how? I would love to see it. I would love to get enough of her perspective to go, oh yeah, I get it now. But no, that doesn't happen. Instead, we get him torturing her and making her life hell, and I'm going to need more before I can buy into and believe she loved him, and more importantly, feel things about it other than confusion and annoyance. Really, all the emotional heavy lifting here is done by background details or broader concepts, like Ymir smiling here, or the concept of Stockholm Syndrome or trauma bonding just being a thing that I've heard of before, so I guess it could justify this. But as usual, the details are what matter, and we get so little of that with Ymir. Instead, Eren simply tells us what happened. And that's a lot less powerful than experiencing her change of heart for myself in a more dramatized way. And that's really the problem with a lot of this. We don't get to see enough. For example, Eren has conversations with most of the members of the hero crew, but we only get to see Armin's. The others simply have a panel or two reacting to whatever he said to them, and that's that. And because they only get such a brief response, I'm left distant from their emotions at the very end of the story. Key points of their perspective skimmed over. And since what we see from them, to me, feels like a relatively positive response to his actions, I'm left even more confused. They wanted to stop the rumbling, didn't they? Well, sure, I guess they did, but 80% is still gone. If I were them, I would be horrified and angry that he had done this, confused why he would think this would help them become heroes, enraged that this idiot somehow thought this was worth it. But I could be convinced that they would react this way. if I, saw anything about their conversations here. A big part of this is tone, which can be so hard to quantify. Just how these little moments and nuances add up to create something that works perfectly fine for some and feels off to others. And when I read this, I got the sense that the tone was supposed to be tragic, but also Eren was being framed as something of a hero, especially with how his friends reacted. But I can't see anything remotely heroic in him anymore. Because 80% of the world is gone. The Jaegerists are going to cause problems. Hanji and so many more of their comrades are dead, and the remaining countries are definitely gonna wanna see the rest of them dead. This is almost the furthest thing from a victory. And the tone here feels more akin to an action blockbuster than the horror I would have expected. And even Armin's conversation with Eren, which we get a lot of stuff about, doesn't really work for me. At times, it comes across like we're going through a checklist of plot points Eren needs to discuss so the story can make sense, so the plot can be revealed. So when Armin says, "Thank you, you became a mass murderer for our sake," well, actually, I'm fine with that in and of itself. I can believe Armin would say this to his best friend who, as far as he can tell, has basically lost his mind. To me, this feels like Armin trying to comfort Eren during their last moments together, understanding that there's really nothing to be gained by reprimanding him now. However, I still don't enjoy it because it feels like there's a piece missing. I would expect true shock and horror from Armin here, for him to absolutely freak out, even if it won't really gain him anything. Because this is the biggest betrayal possible. Flattening the world they promised to see together. How could anything be worse? Yet somehow, he composes himself so quickly. Honestly, it feels as though the scene got skimmed over like a matter of course, giving us too much detail on the wrong things and keeping the stuff I want more details about consciously cryptic or too brief. Even in the anime, which gives more details and more of a reaction from Armin, it still wasn't enough, and it really undermines both of these characters for me. Speaking of skimming things over though, Historia. She stopped being nearly as relevant after the time skip, which makes sense. She's had her freedoms restricted due to her royal blood and a tragic fate awaits her. But I don't care about it making sense. What I care about is that she was one of my favorite characters in the story. Someone who had great chemistry with Eren due to the character-defining moments they had shared and the parallels drawn between them. And now she's barely doing anything. In my opinion, she never had a climactic enough moment that justified mostly leaving her in the background now. I wanted to see more of her. I expected to see more of her. But instead, she's almost purely relegated to a source of motivation for Eren. But for all my talk about skimming things over, I've been doing some skimming myself, haven't I? After all, I haven't even touched on what might be the most important part. The true final twist of Attack on Titan. The reveal of what Eren's future and past sight abilities have done to his brain and perception of free will. The fact that everything that happened here was preordained, predetermined, and that this was the ultimate challenge to Eren's freedom-focused ideals. Thematically, I get this. Eren was so focused on freedom, but now it's revealed he never had any in the first place. He thought he was making choices based on that desire for freedom, but can they really be called choices if he does these things out of something so close to biological instinct that it becomes set in stone? Something that he sees will happen not only because it's destined, but because he made it destined. And yet, paradoxically, he's only making this choice because of those ideals. On paper, I actually think this is pretty neat, if a bit confusing. A solid, tragic end to his character that challenges him more than ever before. And yet, I don't like it at all. I actually kind of hate it. I've tried to enjoy it. I've reread and rewatched this story, and particularly this scene, so many times. But this final twist only ever leaves me annoyed in a way that's honestly been hard to put into words. And that's because while I've seen people debate the logic of this scene, that isn't really what matters to me. What matters is that one way or the other, Eren's actions here were greatly influenced by his future sight ability, rather than purely by the life experiences and parts of the story I had witnessed up until now. It totally muddies his motivations to me. Did he choose this path because he wanted to complete the rumbling? Did he do it because he wanted his friends to be heroes, even if I think that's really dumb? Did he do it because this was the only guarantee of wiping out the Titans, but also because it was the only future he saw at all? Is it some sort of mix of all the above? Did Eren not choose this path because after all it was the only path he saw, or was it the only path he saw because it was the only path he ever would have chosen? I don't know. And maybe that's part of the point, right? Just like Eren, I don't know exactly what happened. He's confused, I'm confused, but what I do know is that I don't like that. What I do know is that I would have loved to see more of why Eren thought this was the best course of action in a way that went beyond the fact that his past and future sight abilities had fried his brain. What I do know is I would have loved it if this final chapter didn't twist the moment that had got me fully invested in this story in the first place. That day, that time, I just knew Bertholdt wasn't supposed to die yet. The one who let him go and made her go that way was... For all the great twists and turns Attack on Titan had in its plot, that was never what made me truly love the story. No, it was the characters. With startling efficiency, it slowly gave each of them depth, laying a breadcrumb trail of hints about their underlying motives and personalities throughout, which only made rereads and rewatches even better. And those moments I would always go back to that just got better every single time I experienced the story. Those explosive, emotional scenes only made possible by carefully considered storytelling. Levi's choice between Erwin and Armin, perfectly built up by his interactions with Kenny and this idea that everyone needs something to live for. Ymir's backstory, her moment of ecstasy as she regains control over her own body, waking up beneath a beautiful starlit sky. Particularly in the anime, the swell of the music and the simply glorious presentation. Jean's change from a selfish coward aiming to live an easy life inside the walls to one of the most brave and responsible recruits, spurned forward by the convictions of a fallen friend. Reiner's tortured past and his various betrayals, the parallels between him and Eren. Zeke going from a simple monkey man to this character with so many layers of motivation and a gut-wrenching, tragic past that only revealed Grisha's deepest failures. And, well, I could go on. But the important thing, the point here, is that these are the scenes I always remember because they made the characters feel real to me. Like they were making what they could of this chaotic and crazy world, making the best choices they could see, even if you never know what the outcome will be. And one of those fantastic moments, the very first of those fantastic moments, well, it was this, the emotional core of Attack on Titan that was so easy to grasp. All of this madness spiraled out of control because one young boy watched his mother get brutally murdered right in front of his eyes. No matter what other twists there were, no matter how complex the rest of the stuff could get, that remained the simple beginning of our terrifying story. But that's no longer the case. Now this was a choice Eren made, or alternatively, something that was destined to happen, so he had already made that choice before he even chose to make it in the first place. So this conversation with Reiner, where he asked him why his mother had to die, where I believed all the things I had experienced in the narrative that affected him were what led to this change in him, well, ultimately, that's not what caused this. Instead, Eren only got to this point because he saw what had happened and is now talking about his own culpability in his mother's murder. And I can't feel anything toward that other than confusion and frustration. The version of Eren I had enjoyed, the one I had spent so much time with, did something because of mechanics and ideas that don't feel human to me. Manipulating the past? I don't care about that. Not in this story. I care about choices. I care about characters and seeing how they react to the world around them. I care about Eren's conversation with Reiner exposing his disturbing view of the world and how he's found himself able to connect with the enemy, rather than him hinting at the fact that he was the one responsible for his mother's death. I care about Eren being the protagonist of this story and not the final mystery box waiting to be opened. I've seen people say that those who don't like the ending simply didn't get Eren. That people bought into the hype of Eren's villain side even when it should have been obvious that this was a front for some deeper plan, even if he was also still villainous. And yet, for me, that couldn't be further from the truth. I thought Eren's villainous side was an incredibly natural extension of his prior developments, a fantastic way to show his downfall and how the pressures placed upon him had destroyed any semblance of a moral compass he once had, but how, at the same time, some of this had been in him from the very start and had simply gone unnoticed. In some ways, that's still what the story is about. And yet, clouding all of that is this course of action Eren took to rid the world of the curse of the Titans, a choice he only made because of a future he saw, but one that I only learned about right at the end of the story. Removing the readers and audience from Eren's perspective for so long was always a big risk. For some, it worked out. But for me, It allowed way too much time to get invested in ideas and concepts that ran counter to the story's final moments. It allowed me to believe in an ending where Eren truly wanted to see the rumbling through to its end and would either succeed or fail based on a conflict with his friends. And it allowed me to believe, through it all, that the simple beginning of our story held true. Maybe this would have worked better if I could relate to the emotions more, if I had seen more about Eren's feelings regarding these specific things. I would have certainly rather seen him come to the conclusion that he could foster this connection between Ymir and Mikasa. I would have rather spent more time on his relationship with Mikasa. I would have rather spent more time focusing on the potential idea that Eren only saw this future because it was the future he chose and not so much about destiny. But we couldn't do that. We couldn't spend time on the emotions here and on confirming some details. Of course not, because that would ruin the twist. And so, by its end, Attack on Titan had gone from a story about a character I loved, with some startling twists that challenged him, to a story where the character became the twist itself. Does this ruin the story for me altogether? No. I still love plenty of Attack on Titan. I can still appreciate so much of what it showed me. That it introduced me to anime in the first place and to manga by extension. That it got me so excited about these mediums that I ended up making this YouTube channel in the first place. So I'm not going to pretend that this ending undoes all the great things about the story. But what I can say, with complete certainty and regardless of how anyone else feels, is that it still left me so disappointed.